Welcome or welcome back. I just got back from grocery shopping, loading up on some of the staples that I normally get from Costco, and I thought it would be fun to bring you along on how I meal prep as a busy person and show you some of the things that I do to save time and save money in my weekly meal prep. I'll be sharing some of my plant-based meal ideas and some hacks for doing things a little bit cheaper. So stay tuned. I'll show you my Costco haul and not really that impressive, just my basic groceries and what I am planning to prepare for my family for the week. All right, let's get into it.
One of the first ways that I am able to save on my grocery bill is by buying some things frozen. Things such as berries are really delicious and healthy for you to eat, but buying them fresh, especially in the wintertime when they're out of season, is really expensive and they don't last for very long in the fridge. So buying them frozen allows them to last longer. I got oats, flour, salt, oil, vegetable bouillon base, maple syrup, some spices, avocados, bananas, and apples for fresh eating and snacks and lunches. I also got some bell peppers, tomatoes, and some beans. It would be cheaper to buy dry beans versus black beans. Unfortunately, Costco doesn't have them. I have noticed that the price of fresh produce has gone up significantly. I think I paid over $10 for this bag of avocados. Normally that's not something that I would splurge for, but per fruit they were actually cheaper than at my regular grocery store, so I opted to pick them up at Costco, and I was able to make them last by putting 2 or 3 in my fruit basket and putting the rest in the fridge until I was ready to eat them, so that none of them went bad before I could get to them. Another way that we can save money is by knowing which things to store together. So things like apples and bananas, they give off a gas that causes other fruit to ripen. So if you're trying to ripen up something like avocados, putting them with your bananas is a great thing to do. If you do not want them to be very ripe, storing them away from them or storing them in the fridge is a good idea. I feel like I should also say that there is always a trade-off here too. I've heard it said that you can get things cheap, easy, or quality, but not all three. So something that is easy and pretty decent quality is you can get cans of beans from Costco that you just, dump and go, ready to go into a recipe. Or it would actually be cheaper but less easy to get the same quality of organic beans or whatever if you got them dry. And I feel like that goes for most things that you're going to find at the grocery store. So I tried to make some trade-offs here between what things were going to make my life easier, like having cans of tomatoes and beans ready to go and use in recipes, not buying everything fresh, versus what was going to be cheaper, like buying my olive oil in a bigger container, pouring it into the other container that I used to have, as opposed to buying smaller bottles. So is it slightly less convenient? Maybe, but just thinking about that as a trade-off when you're going to the grocery store, thinking about what are the things that you really need that convenience on, what are the things where you're willing to put in a little bit more work in order to get that high quality product a little bit cheaper. I feel like this next tip is kind of obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway in case someone didn't know. Buying things like spices in bulk is in larger quantities, even if you can't get it package free in bulk is much cheaper than buying the individual small bottles. If you like to use the smaller bottles with the shakers, you can refill your smaller containers from your big Costco containers. But I've found, especially for things like spices, not all things at Costco are necessarily cheaper than your regular grocery store, but for things like spices, I find buying the bigger container is definitely worth it. Same goes for things like flour, sugar. If you buy those in larger containers, and you can see here, I can't quite achieve that perfect social media aesthetic pantry restock, but we'll get that all cleaned up and move right ahead to our first recipe meal prep, which for me is making bread for the week. I might be late to the bread making train that I know started a couple years ago, and I've not quite mastered the sourdough yet, but I am getting really good at creating the overnight no-knead bread loaf, which for me is the right amount of simple and cheap. It only takes 3 ingredients, 4 if you count the water: flour, salt, yeast, and a bit of warm water. And I will leave that overnight, and then I'll be able to bake my bread in the morning. For me, that's simple enough. There's not a lot of ingredients. It's not very complicated. It's something that everyone can appreciate, like fresh bread. Fresh bread is delicious. It makes everybody happy. And from a health standpoint, eating something fresh that doesn't have a lot of preservatives is something that is more enjoyable. You know, we feel good about it. So making the fresh bread is something that I can do that helps save a little bit of money. If, you know, you were going to buy a fancy bread loaf or sourdough loaf from a local bakery, or even a grocery store was going to be like $5, $6, $7, $8, and the ingredients are way cheaper than that. I think the entire bag of flour that I have maybe costs $10, and that's going to get me months worth of bread. So many loaves of bread I will get from this one bag of flour. So it's exponentially cheaper to make it yourself, but it does take a little bit of a time investment. You've got to plan the day ahead to start your loaf, start it rising, so that the next morning or next evening when you get home from work, however it works for you, you can get started on that loaf. My next tip for saving time and saving money with your meal prep is to choose 1 to 2 of your meal foundations and try to make them from scratch. Making your items from scratch, as we already described in the example with the bread, is going to be a lot cheaper than buying the pre-made or pre-packaged food. It's also going to allow you to control the ingredients, and it's going to be fresher. It's not going to have any preservatives in it, and it's just going to be more enjoyable to eat. If starting with something like fresh made bread is a little bit too overwhelming, start with something else. So for me, the first thing I decided to try and make from scratch on a regular basis was hummus. We use hummus a lot. We eat hummus a lot in our family for snacks. I also use it in making lunches for school or for work. So building the skill or building the muscle memory of being able to make that from scratch, you know, memorizing a recipe that I really like and being able to make that part of my routine, to make that every Saturday or every Sunday, whatever day I happen to have off and I'm able to do a little bit of meal prep. That was the first thing that I tried that made it easier throughout the week. And making sure that I always have the ingredients on hand so that I can make that whenever we run out makes it simple, easy, and a little bit cheaper. Now I'm trying to work on having that same process in my bread making, figuring out what is the right rhythm, cadence, the right amount to make so that we have enough bread for the week so that we can have toast in the morning, or I can make sandwiches for lunch, and that we have fresh bread to eat all week long. Another way that I'm able to save time, energy, and money in my meal prepping is actually through meal planning. I try to have in my mind 1 to 2 different breakfast options for the week and between 3 and 5 dinner options for the week, that I've already come up with a list of what I'm going to make in my head, preferably written down on paper, but at least I'll have it in my head or write in a notes app on my phone what meals I'm going to make for that week. And I try to plan it so that I'm using recipes that share ingredients. So for example, I might make a big pot of lentils or beans, and in this clip I'm making some kidney beans because that's what I had on hand. But a really good example of this is I might make a big pot of lentils in exactly the same way you see me preparing the beans. And I could use that for 2 different recipes. I might make the mushroom and lentil ragu sauce or bolognese sauce, depending on what name you know for that. I make a vegan version of a bolognese sauce using lentils to replace the meat or whatever. You could use one of those fake meat products, but we're trying to save money here, so we're not doing that. So I will make a sauce with mushroom and lentils to add that flavor and to add that rich protein. And I will prepare the lentils in that way for a more Italian inspired sauce to have with pasta, but you can also use those lentils to make a more Indian inspired dish like dal, using flavors like turmeric and ginger and cumin. And the way that I'm able to meal prep ahead and make this a little bit simpler on my weeknights when I'm making dinner is that I'll make that big pot of beans or big pot of lentils, and I'll prepare them really simply. I might just use broth when I'm making them, a little bit of salt, and here I'm adding tomato and garlic as well to the broth, since those are shared ingredients that would work well in either recipe. So I'll make a really big pot of whatever kind of beans or lentils that I'd like to have that week, essentially doubling the portion of one recipe, and then I cut it in half. I could make the pasta dinner dish for dinner tonight, and then I could have the more curry or more Indian style lentils another day. So I just make it very simply. I don't add the specific spices that I would use to make it an Italian bolognese or an Indian inspired dish yet. So I just season it very simply: garlic, tomatoes, a little bit of the vegetable base broth. Cook it, divide the lentils in half, use 1/2 for the first recipe, use the second half for the second recipe. And that makes it really easy to stretch one ingredient across multiple meals without it getting boring or you getting tired of just eating the same thing. For this pot of beans, I am preparing them for upcoming taco night the next night, so cooking the beans. Honestly, I don't remember whether it was late at night or early in the morning, but preparing them for the next day's dinner. So I guess that's a bonus tip, is that sometimes I'll start something in the Instant Pot overnight and then store it in the fridge during the day so that I can have it ready when it's time for me to make dinner the next night. Making the components for our taco night, I'm making roasted sweet potatoes in the oven and chopping up some peppers and onions for the fajitas. I will saute these on a pot on the stove with some mushrooms, onions, and peppers. But the money saving or time saving hack here is that while I'm chopping up the peppers for that night's dinner, I will also chop up a little bit more and have those in prepared cut up strips that could be used to pack in a lunchbox, so that I'm saving a little bit of time for the next day by having that piece of it already prepped. So if I don't have time, and usually I don't have the time or the energy to just prep veggies for lunch boxes for an entire week, one day while I'm getting ready to make dinner for that night, I will also put some veggies aside that can be used for lunches throughout the week. Thanks so much for spending time with me today, restocking my pantry from my grocery trip and getting some meals ready for the week. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button, and if you'd like to see more content from me on plant-based meal ideas, how to save money in these uncertain times, as well as some fun outdoorsy gardening content as well, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably also like my easy monthly meal planning strategies, which I can link that video down in the description box for you below and up in the cards. Drop me a comment below and let me know, what tips do you use to save money on your grocery bill, and how are you able to make delicious, fresh, healthy recipes for your family without spending an arm and a leg on groceries, as I know it is easy to do in these times. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye-bye.